before medical cannabis became a thing, the black market was already up and running. It's not that it was created, it was expanded. Coming from America, somebody walks into a gun shop and buys a gun. You don't have any control what they're going to do with that gun after they leave that shop.
The headlines are pumped out. The black market will always be there until we positively look for a solution. And what's happening at the moment is we're not positively looking for a solution.
You also need to educate these, and you need to educate them properly. Because the education that's being put out there is cannabis bad, cannabis bad, cannabis bad.
And this is the whole point of why we're doing this podcast. We want to bring the education to the people.
And you must stand united on this and out fight for the passion of our youth. You can do it by bringing about compulsory education.
For this first episode, yes, we can start and dive right into it. We want to backtrack a little bit. There's been some articles in the paper over the last few months. We kind of want to backtrack and discuss some of those articles. The first one that we want to go back to is April 20th. The headline says here, black market in medicinal cannabis. Politicians concerned prescriptions are being misused. From Deputy Dudley Owen, she has said, have we unwittingly opened up an avenue for recreational use via the accessibility to medicinal cannabis, despite it being via prescription? The short answer is yes. But we also have to remember that before medical cannabis became a thing, the black market was already up and running. So it's not that it was created, it was expanded, more or less. However, what medical cannabis did do is it boosted the quality of what's now available on the streets, which now cuts down on the import of low-grade cannabis from drug cartels that are most likely going to be cut with things that you don't want to put in your body. So now what we have is a black market industry created by medical that now keeps everything within the island, and it keeps it within the community. There's no exports going off island. There's very little imports coming into island. And this is according to recent headlines here that cannabis imports are in decline. And Miss Webb from Customs and Excise says that I think the drug landscape has changed slightly with medicinal cannabis now being available on prescription, said Miss Webb. So it's a natural thing that we're not seeing it at the border so much. 100%. I mean, if you have an influx of a product on island, why would it be now imported onto island when it's already here? So it makes sense that this is naturally happening, just like she said. Yeah.
But what they're not diving into it is the root cause of exactly why this is happening. And that's kind of what we want to dig into on the first episode. We want to dig into these headlines and kind of talk about exactly why this is happening, especially over in the Channel Islands where it is so difficult for people to bring it in, and why now the market is full of medical cannabis.
Yeah.
But there are legitimate reasons.
Oh, yeah.
There are absolutely legitimate reasons that we're going to dig into.
So let's hear what Medican and Pure Health have to say about this as well. So both Medican and Pure Health said they were doing everything they could to ensure that medicinal cannabis was only used by those who had been prescribed it. We strictly adhere to prescribing protocols, said Tina Bolding from Pure Health. And Gary Whip, chief executive of Medican, said we have no contact from Guernsey police about diversion to others or onward selling. However, I can say that all Medican patients are educated about the regulations surrounding their prescription medication and sign a consent form to that effect. So just like any other clinic that prescribes opioids, these clinics adhere to stringent guidelines to ensure proper use. However, you're not going to see other clinics in the newspaper trying to defend themselves over opioid diversion. You're only now seeing this with cannabis clinics. And the reality is that once prescriptions picked up, clinics cannot control what happens to those medications, whether it's opioids or cannabis. Like said in the paper as well, where local cannabis clinics have said they exercise extreme caution to avoid diversion fraud, but are unable to police the distribution of cannabis post-prescription any more than a pharmacy can prevent other prescribed drugs from being passed on. It's 100% correct. You can't control what a person does, whether it's a prescription drug or anything that you buy from a store or you pick up. You cannot control what that person's going to do with it afterwards. Coming from America, somebody walks into a gun shop and buys a gun. You don't have any control what they're going to do with that gun after they leave that shop. You know, if they go out and they use it for something they shouldn't, is that shop owner held responsible because they sold it to them? They're not.
No.
You know what I'm saying? So you can't control what people are going to do with that after they leave, you know, that pharmacy or that clinic or that shop. You can only take precautions and police so far to make sure these things don't get into the wrong hands. That's really all you can do at that point. And I don't think the clinic should be held responsible for the diversion of product.
Well, we are very much we're at a T-junction at the moment, and we're going down one lane, and we're focusing on what the titles and the headlines are saying. You know, we're not looking at the cause of what this is, at exactly why people are having to sell on the black market, because the way that the states have run the whole medicinal thing, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And you'll know from experience coming from Oregon, from your background within the cannabis industry, like the way the patients are made to purchase their scripts in the volumes that they're made to purchase their scripts, and without the knowledge backing the doctors themselves, the prescribing doctors. I mean, this is something obviously you've taught me a lot over the last few years, and it's been incredible to see exactly kind of where the UK and the Channel Islands are kind of pushing, and it's in just totally the wrong direction.
Yeah, I can't argue that at all. I mean, even Deputy Proud, he says here, the legalization of cannabis for medicinal use has led to the growth of the black market. Yeah, he's right.
But what are the reasons?
Percent correct. Oh, we'll get to those reasons. He's also conceded that the same problem could also occur with any other controlled drugs, including those categorized as Class A. I got to be honest, I'm happy he recognizes that. You know what I'm saying? And that he's not just saying that it's just cannabis, you know, because these diversions happen with all drugs. You know, he also says there is now an accepted problem with the diversion of prescription medication, which needs to be urgently addressed. So no problem before cannabis? Or just now accepting a problem of diversion of prescription medications? So again, nothing before cannabis, opioids. Yeah. Let's take some opioids, OD, and die. So we weren't accepting that as a problem before cannabis. So that's, can't say I agree with that. This should have been something that was looked at prior to cannabis coming into play, in my opinion. But
the statistics, I think you've actually done a bit of diving into statistics. Whether we go into them in this episode or not is entirely up to you. But I think the statistics have been quite interesting to see as well.
Yes, I have some answers I got back from the Freedom of Information Act concerning some of the statistics on cannabis versus alcohol versus mental health versus proprietary drugs, and I have a lot of stats that we are definitely going to talk about in another episode for sure. But let's talk solutions to this.
Absolutely.
So everybody's black market. What are the solutions to addressing this? So rumor has it that I've heard, and again, this is rumor, don't know how true it is, that the states want to implement specialist only to prescribe instead of a GP to cut down on diversion. I disagree with this 100%. This is going to do two things. One, you're going to be punishing the patient, because what happens in the sense of, now, if every clinic has to have a specialist, and let's just use a pain specialist as an example. Let's say that medical clinic doesn't have a pain specialist, but pain is a qualifying condition for cannabis. Well, that person that has pain can now not go to this clinic and get cannabis because they don't have a pain specialist. So now you're not really cutting down on diversion, you're just hindering the patient at that point. Not to mention, this is going to hinder clinics. So right now, like all clinics, they have 2 to 4 doctors. But if you have to implement a specialist for every ailment that cannabis can help with, I mean, you're talking tons of doctors that every clinic is going to have one for pain, one for MS, one for cancer, one for heart, one for brain, one for this, one for that. That's just not realistic for a clinic either. If this is true, and this is the way that it's being talked about implementing, that's going to be a disaster for the clinics and for the patients at that point. So some of the things that can be done to help reduce diversion. But right now we're in a situation to where if you get prescribed cannabis, they come in 10 and some companies do 15 gram pods. So what happens in the situation that I just got 40 grams of cannabis, but I didn't respond well to it. So I don't like it and I only have 40 grams of it. So what's going to happen now is that's going to lead to diversion. That person knows that, well, I can get rid of it and get my money back. It ain't working for me, so they're just going to divert it to the black market.
And just reversing on that as well, the clinics, whether it's the same in the UK or not, the clinics as well, that if you're prescribed something and they don't have it in stock, they won't tell you they don't have it in stock. They will just replace it with something else that is either an indica or sativa, which going down the indica sativa route is a whole minefield itself. But you have no choice about what your script is. They will literally, you will go from one month and then all of a sudden you've got 40 grams of something that you have no idea how you're going to react with.
Exactly. So one of the things that they can do, in my opinion, is reduce the pot size to say 5 grams instead. This will now enable people to, I believe, get a more variety. If you're on, say, 40 grams, so instead of getting, 4 different strains, which a lot of places won't even let you do, you have to get 2 sativa, 2 indica.
Yeah.
But if you can reduce the quantities of those pots and somebody doesn't get on with that medication, they're not left with a larger quantity to now ship to the black market. So I think just I'd like to see it reduced to 1 gram.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Let people try things and figure out what works for them. But given the landscape in which we're in with this industry here in the Channel Islands, UK, take it to 5 gram pot. This will help the diversion. It's not going to eliminate, but it'll help reduce. The most important one, in my opinion, is implementing policy that allows people to pick up partial scripts. When you have a situation to where, somebody's prescribed 40, 60 grams a month, their bill for that's 500 pounds, but they only make 300 pounds a week. So what do you expect this person to do? Now they're caught between a choice of, do I buy the script or do I pay my rent and food for the month? And you know what to choose? They're going to choose the script because they know they can take that script. The black market here on Guernsey is outrageous in price. You can go ahead and sell half your script, make all your money back from your script, still have your script for the month, and be able to pay your rent and get food. So being able to pick up smaller quantities, if you're prescribed 40, 50, you walk in and say, I can only afford 10 this week, but I can come back next week and get the rest or whatever, you should be allowed to do that. Being forced to pick up all of that at one time is what is highly contributing to the diversion of product terror. That's
and this is absolutely allowed with other prescription drugs. If something is out of stock at a chemist, you're given a receipt to come back and pick up what you haven't got. So why can it not be the same with medicinal cannabis? Why can't you walk in and say, can I just take 10 this week? Even if it is a 10 gram top, can I just take 10 this week and come back next week and get the other 10? Well, I don't understand the problem with that.
I don't understand it either. I mean, a lot of people are saying, pharmacies don't want to take on that responsibility. Then maybe pharmacies should be taking on the responsibility.
Maybe it's not the pharmacist's place.
Out cannabis.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be a completely separate pharmacy, clinic, or whatever that's doing that. Also, this is going back to what you mentioned before, changing the approach in the way that doctors are prescribing. So it will help to also reduce diversion, specifically transitioning away from categorizing our cannabis as indica and sativa. As a perfect example, we'll use a couple strains here, Farm Gas, Atlantic Glue. These are categorized as indica dominant strains. First, I'll point out, you see that word dominant in there. That just means it's more indica than it is sativa. It means it's a hybrid. Okay, it's a cross between the two. Just because it's dominant as an indica, to me, what that says that instead of the plant being really short and squatty, really fat leaves and have a super short flowering time, that it may be a medium-sized plant, have not super skinny but not super fat leaves, but kind of medium-sized leaves. And, maybe it has like a 9 to 10 week flowering time instead of 8, as opposed to a 12 for a full sativa, right? So that's what indica dominant says to me. But when these are being prescribed on as this farm gas is an indica, it's going to make you sleep. This Atlantic glue is an indica, it's going to make you sleep. And then people are finding that they're staying up all night because of the terpene profile and there being more limonene. Well, that doesn't meet the patient's needs now, does it? No, this strain ain't making me sleep, so it's no good. Yeah, let's sell it on to the black market. Let's trade it off to somebody else and get something that may work. The diversion from this industry is the fault of the way the medical industry has been implemented. I wish people would see that. It's not the patient trying to be nefarious. It is the way the system has been implemented, and a lot of people who can't afford this medicine or are getting prescribed inaccurately are going to do what they have to do to survive and make ends meet. Period. That thing you act to matter.
Well, it just brings it down to, I mean, it sounds cliche, but the war on drugs has never worked, and it doesn't matter what the headlines are pumped out. The black market will always be there until we positively look for a solution. And what's happening at the moment is we're not positively looking for a solution. We've got headlines such as this, which are causing such problems, especially for people who don't understand cannabis. That's the problem. And this is the whole point of why we're doing this podcast. We want to bring the education to the people to understand exactly why this is wrong, and bring forward that it is a medicine. And people should be able to choose whether they want to smoke cannabis. The bottom line is you should have sovereignty over your own consciousness. It shouldn't be a case of, as an adult, you should be able to choose. And there is no difference between going home and having smoke than there is going home and having a glass of wine.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where we want to be. We want to be pushing, like I say, we're at the crossroads at the moment and we're concentrating on the black market and the problems caused by that. But we really, really need to be pushing down solutions and looking at what does work around the globe. Because there's so many places now where you look and you're like, it does work. And there's a lot of countries making a lot of money from it. There's so many positives to looking down the other road on this crossroads at the moment. And we're not.
I couldn't agree more. I got really nothing to add to that because it's everything. We got to get out of the bubble that we're living in and actually try to progress this. And Deputy Prow goes on to say here, concerns which require more investigation have also been raised by subject matter experts of increasing incidents relating to diverted products, including psychosis. We are going to be covering psychosis in a future episode. I'd also like to know who are the subject matter experts, because that subject matter would be cannabis. And as far as I'm aware, there are no cannabis experts within the state's members. So I would like to know who are the experts, and if we know who they are, I'd love to have them on the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the invitation goes out to Deputy Prow as well.
Absolutely. So after all this, black market, diversion, all this stuff, question is, has anyone actually been convicted of diversion? Going back to this article, as of April 20th, it states that nobody has been convicted in Guernsey of supplying medical cannabis without a license, although 2 men have appeared in the magistrate's court in February to face such a charge. In what is thought to be the first such case locally, their case was committed to the royal court. So again, this was in April 20th, in this article here. There is an update on their case. That states that both men admitted to the offense of supplying medical cannabis, and both sentenced to 1 year in prison, suspended for 2 years, as well as fines of 750 pounds. The sentence was handed down despite the judge acknowledging that neither made financial gain, both had previous good characters, and the fact that both men made full and frank admissions and cooperated fully with the police. Judge Catherine Fuchs, if I'm saying that right, told the defendants that despite there being no guidelines for this offense, she was certain that it was serious enough to cross the threshold of custody. I'm sorry, but after admitting that there's no guidelines for this offense, they're still charged? How does that make sense at that point? And it also states in that article, too, that these guys weren't selling it. They were trading it back and forth when somebody else, if his friend ran out, he was just helping his friend.
It was between scripts. Yeah.
It was between scripts. Just here for a little bit to get you through. Thanks a lot. Here, just getting you back.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. Yeah. So what this is saying to me is that two friends helping one another out in time of need is now considered crossing the threshold of custody. Well done, Judge. Well done.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's just ridiculous in my opinion.
And this isn't an isolated incident as well, because it's well known that the Channel Islands as a whole are very, very strict when it comes to anything in the legal side of cannabis or any drugs. The penalties that are handed out around the Channel Islands are very, very harsh. But anything to do with any drug, it is well known.
Yeah, I've heard that it was actually even worse before I ever got.
Oh yeah,
as far as the penalties go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a little joint would get you like years in prison.
It wasn't far off. It wasn't far off that. It's scary bad.
Yeah, and it's just Let's moving on a little bit here. So there's this little section down here that kind of let you get into a little bit. This is coming from the education president, Deputy Dudley Owen. Children receiving mixed messages. She states in here that children have been put at risk as a result of receiving mixed messages about cannabis, Guernsey's education president has said, and some have been able to obtain medical cannabis illegally. Well, naturally, this is going to persist because it remains an illegal substance without regulation. If it's the black market, it's going to thrive until it's legalized, taxed, regulated, period. There's always going to be cases where product is going to end up in hands that you don't want it to, the wrong hands. And it's due to the easy availability on the streets with these products. I'm going to use myself as an example. Growing up as a teenager, 16, 17, 18, see, in the U.S., we have slightly different laws as far as age goes. Okay, so drinking age is 21, cannabis age 21. A lot of people might hate me for this, but I agree with that. I think 18 is too young. That's something to... The thing is that when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, alcohol wasn't easy to get, right? Because it was legal. I had to know somebody who was 21 that could walk into a shop and get me alcohol. There's nobody selling that on the black market. But I had easy access to cannabis. I had easy access to any other drug I wanted because there's no age limit on the street. All right. So, and it's easy to get. Drug dealers don't care who they're selling to. You regulate that market, you legalize it. Now, and this is shown, and we'll be going over this in a future episode as well, that in states in the U.S. that have legalized cannabis, you've seen the youth use decline. And this is due to, it's now you think it'd be easier to get, but it's actually harder to get. Because again, the age is 21, the black market is dying, and you have to know somebody who's 21 to walk into a dispensary and get you weed. So it is becoming harder for youth to get. And now that we have a growing number of scientific evidence based around cannabis, some kids don't want to use it, it's a turnoff. Some do, some don't. I mean, to each their own with it, everybody has a choice on what they want to put in their body, But the fact of the matter is that legalizing, tax, and regulating is going to reduce youth use. But you also need to educate the youth, and you need to educate them properly, because the education that's being put out there is cannabis bad, cannabis bad, cannabis bad. And by telling kids that, And then seeing all these cannabis shops and seeing medical cannabis, yeah, you're right. You're getting mixed messages.
Absolutely.
So you need to up your game with the education that's going out to children about cannabis. You need to educate them on the medical benefits and on the non-medical benefits or non-medical side effects, so to speak. I mean, without hearing the story from both sides, like, of course they're going to get a mixed message. You have to be able to give them both sides. And otherwise, yeah, it's just, they're going to be confused, like she's saying, and they're not going to get it. But again, at the same time, this is going to continue until you legalize, tax, or regulate. Period. Yeah, after you want to.
No, but well, and I've got nothing to add to the education side. You've educated me, so everything that I'm going to say is just going to be regurgitated from you. But it is, like you say, it's not difficult. It is not difficult. The education side of it is, it's not simple, but it's not difficult. And then for the children to understand exactly, like you say.
You're right, it's not difficult. However, what's making it difficult is that the people that are doing the education are only educating on the downside of cannabis, right? There's no education on the benefits of cannabis. Because it's drug war. You know what I'm saying? This is like the DARE program in the 80s when I grew up. And it said drugs bad, drugs bad, drugs bad. No medicinal benefits. Well, we know that's not true now. So being able to educate a teenager, a youth on cannabis and saying, hey, you know, this is used for medicinal purposes. You know, some people use it for recreational use. Here are the benefits. Here are the downsides. Here's why you shouldn't start using it until you're older. And go into those things. But to tell somebody that if you use cannabis, you're going to become an addict and have psychosis and all these other things is like, but yet they're seeing other people using it without these things happening. So yeah, it's mass confusion for them. So there needs to be a proper education system put in place for this.
And also the correct help as well, because when you look at like the countries that have legalized cannabis, you take into consideration some states in the US that they've legalized it, and the outcome has been nothing more than terrible. And then you look at countries like Portugal, who have legalized it, and the outcome has been absolutely fantastic. And the reasonings behind that is, one, the education, but two, the help for the people that need it. The clinics, the correct information, the correct education, and the correct help for people that are struggling. Because that's the big difference between some places. You've got states in America that they don't have the infrastructure. They never put the infrastructure in place to help the people that have got the addiction problems. And then you look at Portugal, but the first thing they did when they started to legalize every drug is they put in the infrastructure to help people that were struggling. And you look at the statistics, and now Portugal has some of the best statistics globally known for anything to do with addiction problems across the board, including alcohol, everything.
And you know who doesn't get talked about enough? Who is actually the pioneer of all that? Uruguay.
Right.
First one to decriminalize all drugs. Where I come from, Portland, Oregon, they did it. First state in the entire country to decriminalize all drugs. Yes, they reversed it because, again, going back to what you were saying, they screwed it up. They didn't implement the proper help for people. And then the homeless population grew and so on and so forth. I mean, I digress. I can go on about the things that happened in Portland, but the one thing I will say that they did right was the implementation of the cannabis industry, especially on the medical side. The reason I say that is because in the U.S., when we had medical prior to going recreational, kind of the same process here, right? You had where you went to a doctor, your GP, you got your records, you went to a cannabis doctor. The difference is that you went to this cannabis doctor, you met them, they went over your medical records and say, yes, your ailment qualifies for medical cannabis. Here's a card that states you're a patient, and that card in your ID is what now allows you to walk into a dispensary. You walk into this dispensary, now you have whatever option you want, like vape cartridge, flower, edibles, topicals, tinctures. Now you have the ability to not only discuss these products with the bud tender there, But now you have the ability to pick up whatever you want and figure out what's going to work best.
And in small quantities, and in grams at a time, yeah.
Yeah. Here, I mean, I don't mean this in an offensive way, but see, in the U.S., the doctors understood that they didn't understand cannabis. So that's why they said, here's a card, go to the dispensary, figure it out, see what works for you. Here, and again, no offense toward the doctors here, but they don't have a full understanding of the plant itself. And that affects the market, and that also affects the way the black market, because if it's not being prescribed properly and you're prescribing based on indica and sativa, and you don't fully understand these plants and terpenes and all that, somebody's going to get something that doesn't work for them. And then they're stuck with all this, you know, they're stuck with a large amount of it for the month, and then they're going to move on to the black market. Again, going back to what we were saying before. And so, I mean, there's a lot of ways to reduce it. There is ways to implement certain strategies. My personal opinion, the best strategy is to allow dispensaries.
Yes.
Get it out of the pharmacy's hands. Allow dispensaries to dispense it. Because the whole medical system here, it's just, yes, people have access to it, which is great. But the red tape behind the industry, it's a farce, man. It's a farce. It's just, doesn't work. If it worked, we wouldn't be having these conversations.
That's exactly, yeah.
Yeah, if you got anything to add to that, I'm going to move on to something.
No, I think you've covered everything.
So I do want to add in here some stats for Pure Health. So Tina Boulding has noted on some positive benefits. So on the positive benefits of cannabis prescriptions, she referred to a recent audit of 95 patients who had been in receipt of prescriptions for a year or more. Of these, 34 reported reducing their alcohol intake, while 38 reported having stopped using tobacco. Dozens had reduced or stopped altogether their use of opioids or other prescribed drugs. And this one's quite interesting to me, is weight loss also reported by 11 of those audited due to being more active as a result of sleeping better or because of reduction of alcohol intake. These are amazing stats. These stats should be posted on the front page of the paper saying cannabis shows promise in reducing alcohol intake. On an island of a lot of alcohol. You know, I don't know the best way to put that, but I mean, there's a lot of alcohol on this island. There's a lot of people who drink it. The fact that cannabis is reducing that intake is huge and should be plastered everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And again, going back to this one, the weight loss. So for me, that's a new one. And I find that to be quite interesting because we all know cannabis to give you the munchies. It's, you know, appetite stimulant as opposed to an appetite suppressant. But given the fact that you're reducing your alcohol intake and being more active, well, you're getting rid of that beer belly, right?
Yep.
So, and if you are getting the munchies and stuff, which I'm sure you are, you're probably indulging in, would think, some healthier foods than what you normally would if you were piss drunk and, I'm grabbing some snacks or whatever. But yeah, I find that to be interesting. And I want to see more stats like that. Because for as long as I've been in this industry since 2012, like that's the first time I've seen a weight loss stat in cannabis. But again, there's not many stats that come out that show about, reduce alcohol intake. And if you're going to reduce alcohol intake and then stuff like this is going to happen, we should be promoting that.
And it'd be nice to see the statistics coming out of the other clinics as well. Because obviously we have a few clinics running throughout the Channel Islands and the UK. And like you said, this is the first time we've seen statistics like this, so it'd be interesting to know if the other clinics are doing the same and kind of what results are coming from them as well.
That would be nice. Maybe we'll cover that in an episode. Reach out to all the clinics and try to get some stats from them.
Yeah,
and kind of make that an episode. I think really the last thing I personally want to touch on is going back to the Pure Health article here. So this is Tina talking about a working group. So Pure Health had actively sought collaboration with the states, Ms. Boulding said, advocating for a working group involving stakeholders. I know Tina. Me and Tina have talked about this before in the past. I have even sent the state's members 2 emails about what I call a rules advisory committee. That's what we called it in Oregon, breaking it down on how it would work, who would be included, and why it's important. And I was met with pretty much silence. I got an email back from Rob Prowse, secretary, basically saying, well, we already have the GBCA. Great. Who's your cannabis expert on the GBCA? I have yet to know who this is, if there is one. Okay. The reason why we want to try to implement this working group, rules advisory committee, whatever you want to choose to call it. So what we did in Oregon is, well, we set up this rules advisory committee. That committee consisted of healthcare professionals, law enforcement, industry professionals, and politicians. It's very important to be including industry professionals in the conversation because we have the experience in the industry, right? You guys have the experience in lawmaking and creating regulation. We have the experience in the actual industry that we can give you the bullet points for you to create these regulations. Not including us is really going to hurt how you progress with the industry. The Rules Advisory Committee, I think, needs to be developed, and it needs to be developed as soon as possible. In addition to that, I like to see like the BGCA agency that's controlling and regulating, inspecting everything on Guernsey. I think that should be a Channel Islands cannabis agency that's doing it for all the islands, including Jersey. What that's going to do is it's going to reduce costs for the entire Channel Islands to implement this agency. And it keeps Jersey and Guernsey all on the same page with this industry, right? Like, I understand Jersey, Guernsey, 2 different countries technically, but let's not pretend like they're not right there.
Yeah.
Right. Let's not pretend like they're not trying to decriminalize and that they're not further ahead than Guernsey right now. Right? So what happens in the event that Jersey goes ahead, maybe decriminalizes next year or even legalizes, right? And Guernsey's still sitting here twiddling their thumbs. Yeah. Now you're going to have an influx in your black market in Guernsey from product coming over from Jersey. Yeah, and then you're going to see that all over the paper, and it's going to be another big issue. Getting the entire Channel Islands on board to move forward with this industry, in my opinion, is crucial. We are going to have a guest on from Jersey as well to talk about the Jersey market and how that's been progressing or not progressing, and so on and so forth. So that'll be happening here in a future episode as well. Hopefully if any states members see this, please consider this Rules Advisory Committee, working group, whatever you want to call it, to include industry professionals so that we can start moving this forward. I think that's really all I kind of got as far as this article goes. I will say too, this article was on April 20th, so it was on the day that we held our first 420 event. So anybody who did attend that, thank you. But yeah, that's really all I got.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've covered everything that we needed to cover.
At least for this episode anyway.
Yeah, we're gonna try and do topic specific episodes. So like the first episode, we really wanted to cover the falsities behind the black market and the paper articles that were coming out. And we wanted to address those first and kind of pave the way for where we want to be next.
You know, I do want to bring up one more thing. It does get thrown around a lot about all the prescriptions being prescribed in the Channel Islands and how the Channel Islands is being overprescribed compared to the UK and all this. It needs to also be taken into consideration that the Channel Islands black market is more expensive than medical. So you're going to have more people opting for medical than you are going to the black market. Where in the UK, you have a black market that's much cheaper than the medical. So people are going to still opt to go to the black market instead of get medical at that point. The only reason to get medical in the UK is so that you don't get arrested. That comes at a price. You're paying more than you would on the black market.
Also like to put it as well that some of the some of the street cannabis is actually of better quality as well.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Depending on where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can definitely get some good quality. I mean, and then again, it also goes back to, like I was saying before, you are going to have the black market drug cartels that are cutting cannabis with stuff that shouldn't be in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cannabis. I've been reading articles where, it's in California, they busted somebody that had tons of cannabis, but it was all sprayed with like fake terpenes and all kinds of other stuff, dude. Like, that's not good either. Like, the fact that we're now tainting a product that we fought so hard to legalize. It's like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing, man? It's like, are we trying to go backwards? Do we want them to try to turn it around? You know what I'm saying? It's like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
Stop putting shit in your cannabis. So, yeah, but that was, I just wanted to mention that because that gets thrown around a lot about the Channel Islands having more patients in the UK and all that. And it's like, you got to look at the black market and how that works. You got to have some sort of street smarts in there to understand that has nothing to do with the prescribing methods of the clinics, right? It has everything to do with the cost of it versus medical versus black market. Yeah.
First episode, I think we've covered everything we need to cover. So we're going to try and stick to a topic per episode, and we're going to try our hardest to bring something out every fortnight. And obviously, please give us a like, share and a subscribe, as horrible as it sounds. We are going to try and push this as hard as possible and bring some topics that are hopefully close to everyone's heart, and to bring education to the people who really need it. If you have any questions or have topics that you want us to talk about, or people that you want us to bring on to talk to, please let us know and give us a comment.
Yes, please leave in the comments. We definitely want your feedback, your constructive criticism. We want to hear what you have to say as well.
And for our next episode, do you want to give them a teaser?
No.
No? So you're going to have to wait and see. So
You can wait.
yeah, so fingers crossed. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for episode number 2. Thanks for joining us.